is there an issue with Jalen Hurts, both skill-wise on the field, and then number two, the other rumors that people keep dropping in the locker room as a leader?
Well, I really want to see, how he looks in training camp. I think that's going to be really important. I was not super encouraged by what we saw from OTAs, and now again, that's a small sample size. That's adjusting to a new offense. Can't really make too much out of that. But let's say if you have that less than encouraging OTAs combined with if he continues to look really not great through all of training camp, well, then that's a real problem. If he has the spring that he did and he comes into training camp here and he crushes it, then who really cares about how he looked in OTAs? So really, it's all in front of him here. But I think I generally, kind of zooming out a bit, find myself in the middle of the discourse about Jalen Hurts. I think some people are too hard on him for last year, and he doesn't get enough credit in some ways. I think on the same hand, some people are like, well, he was actually fine and there's nothing wrong at all. And I'm not there either. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle there. And, this is a huge year for him as it goes to, adjusting, as I said already, to this new offense that he already has kind of set the table for, being 95% new, which is a really interesting comment from him. I don't think there's problems in the locker room. In fact, the aforementioned Joe Santoliquito actually had a good article on Bleeding Green Nation about this recently, where there's a lot of positive feedback really coming from inside the locker room, inside the building, about Jalen Hurts and his leadership and whatnot, and how he seems to be a better leader, or there's signs of him being a better leader and signs of growth from last year. So encouraging signs in that regard, but that all doesn't really matter if he's not delivering the results on the field. So that's really what we have to measure here.
Yeah, my one thing with the leadership, I'm curious your take, is 2022, he's like the stoic, great leader. And then they lose games, and now he kind of was the same person both years. I'm glad he's taking jumps to try to get better, but the complete crushing of him, I don't follow.
Yeah, my thing on that is that, I agree overall with, you don't want someone, changing entirely. You don't want to force things when it comes to personality and whatnot. But I guess it's more of a question than a true thing I know to be true. My question is, I think Jalen Hurts' approach in 2022 worked for that team because it kind of kept them grounded when they were so talented and so good. And I think his leadership style that year kind of humbled them. And I think that was the right fit. Last year was a different circumstance because they weren't on the rise like they were in 2022. They had already proven themselves from the year before. There was the massive weight of expectations coming off the Super Bowl loss. And I think maybe that team felt that pressure a little bit too much, and there wasn't enough levity. I'm not saying, Jalen Hurts needs to be the class clown, but maybe the messaging shouldn't always be, hey, we left money on the table. Hey, this isn't good enough, because obviously we all felt that way when they're losing these close games, but maybe there was just so much pressure on last year's team that it called for a little bit of a different approach and handling at times. And I think there is something to be said for that, and something Jalen Hurts can learn from, kind of that balance of hey, the team needs to have fun. And you guys need to look like you're actually having fun sometimes. And that was really never present last year. And I think that's something that he can kind of take from last year and apply moving forward.
Good point. Kind of read the room type of thing. Moving over to running back. Can you talk about the impact you think Saquon Barkley is going to have? This is the first number one running back we've had probably since LaShawn McCoy that's actually going to be solidified as the guy. Can you talk about the impact you think he'll have here?
So one of my more unpopular opinions is that I think Saquon, I'm lower on him than consensus. I don't think he's going to be bad. That's not what I think. That's not what I'm predicting. And look, if he has a great year, throw it in my face. Feel free. But I think the idea of Saquon Barkley kind of is better than the reality of Saquon Barkley. I know that he played with a terrible supporting cast with the Giants. I get it. However, there are some metrics that kind of measure a running back's ability to perform unrelated to the success of the offensive line, and he hasn't really been good in those. And I just don't think he really has been. I think people think of Saquon now as the same player that he kind of was at Penn State, that he was in the first 2 years of his career, this dynamic, game-changing player. If you're telling me you're adding that player to this offense, I'm thrilled about that. I don't think he's that same player. He ranks towards the top of the NFL in terms of active players in career touches. There's a lot of mileage on him. He is not necessarily the end of his rope entirely. He's what, 27, 28, but he's had a lot of touches. He's had injury issues. So I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be a good running back. I don't know that he's going to be this elite difference maker. There's been some talk, that the Eagles are kind of hoping he's like their Christian McCaffrey. That is such a high bar to clear. That's not even fair to Saquon to kind of, that's the very best case scenario. If that happens, great. That's awesome. But like, that's not a reasonable expectation. You can't just say, oh, that's definitely going to happen. I think Saquon's going to be a good player for this offense. I think he's going to be helpful, but I'm not believing that he's just, revolutionizing everything. He's going to be this massive weapon, too, in the passing attack. I think they will try to get him involved there. But I think part of that is I don't know how much Jalen Hurts loves throwing to running backs necessarily. And also, I don't know how many running backs or I don't know how many targets the running back is getting in this offense when they already have these dominant wide receivers who are going to command a lot of targets. So I think Saquon is going to be more fine than amazing.
I like that take. I actually agree with you, Brandon. I want another question on him. There's rumors that he's good at pass blocking. Every Giant fan I know, and they could be just sour with they lost him, say he's horrible at pass blocking. He improved last year tremendously, but the most of his career, and this has been an issue with us, is he a good pass blocker? Because I think that's the main reason if you're going to sign a running back, he better be able to pass block.
Yeah, I feel like no running backs are good at pass blocking, or at least very few and far between. I don't really know. And the ones who might be good are maybe not even good running backs all, talent-wise. Like Kenny Gainwell is probably one of the better Eagles pass blocking running backs, but I don't think he's not someone who you want to have on the field or want to be getting a lot of touches. I mean, the Eagles coaching staff seems to want to get him more involved than I think they should really be doing. But yeah, I mean, that will be certainly something to keep an eye on in training camp and then season as we go here. I mean, that is again why when you pay Saquon what they did, which is like kind of top 3, top 5 running back money. I mean, yeah, that has to be baked in.
Gotcha. Moving over to the offensive line, I don't think it's being realized as much the loss of Jason Kelce and how much from a brain part of the offensive line, how much he helped Jalen Hurts on identifying coverages, identifying offensive line or defensive line sets, and calling out blitzes, run blitzes, all that type of stuff. How can you explain to the listeners how big of an impact losing Kelce's going to be? And do you think Stoutland U's just going to have this ready to rock by week 1, or are we going to have some major growing pains here for half the season?
Yeah, I think this is a good, like, under the radar kind of thing to watch, in that I don't know that it's going to be as simple as, okay, Jason Kelce is gone. Now Cam Jurgens is taking over all those responsibilities. I don't think it's that 1-to-1. I did call it, as Al Zafiri says here in the comments, I did call the Eagles and Bengals tie in 2020, which is just insane. And
that's wild.
Very lucky. Anyway, when it comes to what was I even talking about there? I got knocked off.
That prediction, you had to give yourself some credit there. Kelce and how it's not just going to be an easy plug and play with Dickerson.
Yeah, I don't know that it's as simple as like, okay, Jurgens is in there now and he takes over 100%, 1-for-1. My kind of thought on this is that I think Jalen Hurts is gonna want to have more control and influence in this process. And I don't know if that means he's taking it over 100%. I think it's something maybe in the middle there where Jurgens obviously is going to have to take increased responsibility. He is the center. He's going to have to, call protections, make calls, whatnot. But I think Hurts, again, is going to be more, he's going to want to be part of that process more than he has been in the past, and probably feels like he's entitled to that more so than he was before, because, obviously you're going to be deferential to Jason Kelce when he's in there and he has this huge legacy, at least relative, to when Jalen Hurts came in. But now, Hurts has been on the team longer than Cam Jurgens has, and certainly has been playing a lot longer than he has. So I think, he's going to feel like he wants control of the offense.
Agreed. Let's move over to the edge. Josh Sweat, Bryce Huff signing. They're penciled in probably as your starters. My question is Nolan Smith. What type of jump? He fell late in that first round there. There's a reason probably he fell. He's put on some weight here. Do you see him making a big jump here in year 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really crucial kind of like Nolan Smith's success or failure is really going to dictate, I think, which way the Eagles pass rush as a whole really goes this year. He's kind of like the make or break factor for that unit. And I'm still optimistic on Nolan Smith. I really liked him coming out of the draft last year. I was pretty happy when the Eagles were able to land him at 30. I thought he is someone they could have taken at 10. Clearly disappointing rookie season. I think some of that is on him. I think some of that is on the coaching staff not trusting him enough. There's obviously not always the best signal when the coaches don't trust a player. Sometimes that is an indication the player's not good. However, this coaching staff has, I think, been too reluctant at times to give young players chances. And we saw last year when Keely Ringo finally got a chance to play on defense, he showed some things. He looks kind of good for a little bit there late in the season. So, I think Nolan Smith kind of needs that opportunity. And it's really going to be like a sink or swim audition for him this year, at least more so than it was last year. And I think we saw enough in brief flashes last year that you say, okay, there's something here. Is there consistency? Can we find a role for him? I think I would like to see the Eagles not overthink it and I would like to see Vic Fangio not get too creative with him, because I think that's kind of what wrong with Nolan Smith last year. They kind of overthought it a little bit. I would like to see them keep it a little bit more simple in terms of like get after the passer and not trying to reinvent the wheel with his role there. So I lean towards more optimistic than pessimistic with Nolan Smith, but certainly, after not playing a lot last year, he has a lot to prove.
Rick Toby checking in with my next question as well. Jordan Davis' advancement, I feel, is of utmost importance to the D-line. Him and Jalen Carter, your thoughts on the interior of that D-line. Can they sustain a full season, which was the problem, a drop-off midway through? Can Jalen Carter get to that, I guess, Jerome Brown-esque level he was at? And then, again, Jordan Davis, is he going to be fine, or is he a problem?
Yeah, I feel really good about Jalen Carter. I'm pretty not worried about him. He seems to be focusing on conditioning as Jordan Davis is, to the point where Jalen Carter said during OTAs, like, not that he hasn't been focusing on technique and anything at all, but like he said, to the point where like my number one focus has been just conditioning. And he's going to have to play a lot of snaps this year, especially if Fletcher Cox gone. So yeah, Carter was on a special kind of pace, like halfway through the first half of last season. We're talking about like he was like on an Aaron Donald kind of level as a rookie, and just from the eye test too. Like I'll throw the stats and projection aside for a second. I mean, just think about some of those big plays he made in the first half of that season, like game-changing, game-winning kind of plays. Like I think that's the real deal. I think that is going to. I think he's going to take another step further in year two. I'm very optimistic about Jalen Carter. I almost think he might be like underrated just from the fact of I don't think anyone thinks he's bad, but I think like it's not just that he's good. I think he could be like really, really, really good. I think he could be like an all-pro kind of good this year, at least like approaching that. So really feeling really good about him. Jordan Davis, I like Jordan Davis. I thought he showed us what he needed to be early on last year. So like that player is there somewhere, right? It's not that he just can't do it at all. I don't think that's the equation here. It's just, it's the conditioning. Can he maintain that level? And really, until we see it, it's kind of hard to just give him the benefit of the doubt. But he seems to be saying the right things, although I felt like he kind of was last year as well. But this is the bigger test in terms of he's going to have to play more than he did last year. So again, kind of like in the Nolan Smith bucket a little bit, where it's just he's going to get the reps or the snaps. It's kind of going to be, does he sink or does he swim?
How do you think the interior linebacker shakes out? I know they signed Devin White, but he had a bad ending there in Tampa Bay, so he could very easily. When we haven't identified the position pretty well either, I know it's Vic Fangio has his footprint on it now. How do you see that shaking out? Like low key, you're hearing they like Zach Bowen a lot. How do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point about Devin White. I mean he was benched. He didn't even play a lot in that Lions playoff game where the Bucs lost.
And Todd Bowles, he knows what he's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think part of it was injury. He seems to be healthier, at least, by all indications, what he said and whatnot. He was dealing with an injury last year. I remember when he picked off Jalen Hurts that one game, the first Eagles-Bucs game, kind of just like ran out of bounds when he maybe had a chance at a pick six. So he seems to be healthier. I like what I saw at him in OTAs. It's a small sample, but he did have some he did look like natural in coverage. He looked explosive. He looked athletic. So there's some positive signs early on with him. I'm intrigued by Devin White. The other spot, who knows? Zach Bond has really the book on him, and even him himself, when he spoke after the Eagles signed him in the spring, he talked about how he was excited to play like more edge rusher and get after the quarterback. And in OTAs, I mean, he's exclusively playing an off-ball linebacker. You have Vic Fangio when he had his first press conference with Philly reporters. Like Zach Bond was the first guy you mentioned when he was asked.
I forgot about that. You're right.
That was pretty wild and unexpected. So, I think Zach Bond, it's not like I'm going to sit here and tell you he's definitely going to be the week 1 starter no matter what. But, I mean, he's getting that first chance, it seems like. So, it's his job to lose, I think, for now. Nakobe Dean was mostly working with the second team and hasn't been able to stay healthy. And I just don't think has really showed much, at least in the 2 years of training camp where I've seen him. I can't recall like a single play that he had in practice where I was like, wow, like that really caught my eye. That's why the Eagles drafted Nakobe Dean. That's why everyone's excited about him. So if he goes through a third camp like that, it's going to be really hard for me to believe that he's just going to finally, the light's going to go on for him and everything's going to click. So right now I feel the best about, at least in terms of how they're going to handle it, Zach Bond and Devin White.
I'm glad you brought up Dean. They draft Jeremiah Trotter. Do you think there's a chance? I like Ben Van Sumeren too. He's a good special teamer, and he seems like kind of a violent linebacker. Not that he's going to be a starter and dominate anything like that. Reminds me of the guy that went to Denver. I forget. Anyhow, do you think there's a chance Nakobe Dean gets cut from this team?
I would say non-zero chance, but I would say because they're so thin at linebacker, feels like he's just going to make it by default almost. Maybe if he's really struggling, you just try to trade him for something while you still can. Not much at that point, but I think Nakobe makes the team. I think the thing is, there's a lot of people always assume, or I'll put it this way. I think there's sometimes an assumption that everyone's always pulling in the same direction within a team. I think that's not the case, and there can be differences of opinion. I think the front office still has hopes for Nakobe Dean. Howie Roseman, who drafted him, they want him to succeed. Coaching staff, as I said, Vic Fangio does not have that same attachment. Vic Fangio was not here when Nakobe Dean was drafted. So there's going to be a difference in opinion there. And I think so far it's clear that Nakobe Dean is like not Vic Fangio's guy necessarily. It doesn't mean he can't be. It doesn't mean he can't elevate to that place. But right now, Zach Bond seems to be that guy. So when it comes to, you asked me about cutting him, I think the front office, is still on Nakobe Dean's side and wouldn't want to do that. But if the coaching staff is clear that they're not going to play him, well, then that's how it would happen.
Thank you for your time, Brandon. I have 2 more questions, so I'm running slightly late on what I told you. Real quick, I can't let you leave without the cornerback position. James Bradbury is still on this roster. Everyone just assumes he's gone. He's still on the roster. I know they were talking about working him out at safety. Is he back? Do you think he's back?
I have a hard time believing it, especially like at safety. Like, he's not going to start, right? So he's going to be a backup. Like, really? I don't know about that. I think the Eagles are kind of just hoping that they find a way to trade him. Again, probably not for much, but if you could get anything, could be worth their while. I think you save like an extra $1 million or so on cap by trading him as opposed to cutting him. So if you can do that, and if you can get some kind of draft capital in return, I think you take that. They're just so deep at corner. They're obviously thin at safety, so they have to figure that out. But there's still some quality free agent safeties on the market as well. If they want to go in that direction, certainly I think it would be better than James Bradbury back there, who's transitioning to a new position. I don't think James Bradbury is as bad as he was last year. I still think, he can be a viable NFL player, but I think his fit clearly is not here anymore. I think it's for some other team out there. So I think at some point, if I'm another team, I would, and if the cost is 7th or whatever, I would take the chance on him.
There's a huge influx, obviously, at corner. You spent 2 high picks. You still have Keely Ringo on the roster. Do you foresee Cooper DeJean or Kenyon Mitchell starting or playing a starting role, or do you think it's probably Isaiah Rodgers' spot right there at the opposite corner?
It is a fascinating training camp battle because the competition's high. And I lean towards Isaiah Rodgers. I was really impressed by what I saw from him in spring practices. He got his hands on the ball a lot. He probably had the biggest play of OTAs when he had a pick 6 on Jalen Hurts, where he just read the quarterback perfectly and jumped a route. and made that play. The way he moves just like is different to me than some of the other cornerbacks. He's really fluid and explosive. The way he breaks on the ball is incredibly explosive. He's very aggressive in that regard. I was really impressed by Isaiah Rodgers. Now, again, if he stinks in training camp, then it doesn't really mean much. But he set, I think, a nice. He set himself up well. Where if he can build on those OTAs, I think also being a veteran kind of could work in his favor again with this coaching staff. I think there's kind of, an inclination to kind of lean that way as opposed to just definitely throwing the rookies out there. But look, Keely Ringo looked really good too. They drafted Quinyon Mitchell very high. So, I think it's going to be a really fierce competition. Injuries will be a factor. Training camp performance will be a factor. For now, I'll lean with Isaiah Rodgers, but that could easily change in training camp.
Final question. Is there any merit to this Nick Sirianni not really being a coach thing? You see coaches that manage and we've really upgraded both spots with both coordinators. And I'm glad. I think that was a lot of the issue last year, personally. I don't know that. I just feel like the inexperience was an issue. You have experienced guys here. Is he lame duck here? Or is he going to be a good coach involved in both and manage kind of like a John Harbaugh type coach or Pete Carroll?
Yeah, my thing with Nick Sirianni is that the question shouldn't be what does he do? It should be what does he do well? And that's really kind of what I've been wondering. And I think in the past, obviously he's won a lot, right? We can all acknowledge that. But you kind of have to parse that from the talent has been really, really good. So how much of that is just the talent and how much of that is the coaching? When you're evaluating coaching, a very simple way, I think, is to evaluate, are you making the most out of the talent that you've had? And I think in that case, you can kind of argue that Sirianni fully hasn't done that. And obviously 2022 was amazing. But last year and the collapse, very discouraging. I kind of evaluate, I think, any head coach, but especially Sirianni, in three main categories. I would say that is culture, which I think has been his strongest to this point. If he can reset the culture and if there's good signs there early on, then that's something that's certainly working in his favor. I feel good about that at that point. If we see encouraging signs in that regard, I give him full credit for that. Number two, game management. And I'm not just talking about the tush push, which is a very, easy thing to do on 4th and 1, at least for the Eagles, or has been. And we'll see how it goes without Jason Kelce. But in other non-tush push situations, when it's 3rd and long, I feel like there's been too many cowards draws, or you're checking down. That aggressiveness in some of these other spots hasn't quite been there. Or it's not even just about being aggressive too. Some of the game management decisions as a whole have been kind of just lacking. They haven't been the cutting edge kind of decision that you'd want to see, especially from a coach who is not going to be play calling. You really want him to be sharp in that regard. I don't think he has been. And then obviously there's the offensive schematic, the schematic design and whatnot, the scheme factor. Obviously he's not going to be as involved in that department. So kind of, not really sure what he brings in that regard. Will have some kind of voice in things. And if the offense is sputtering and failing, then he plays a part in that, even if he's not calling the plays. So, those are the three main categories I'm going to be looking at, especially close this year. And, I think he needs to show, especially in the game management and culture. Those are the two that I think, he's really needs to be fine tuning this roster and really, making sure he gives the Eagles an edge in those categories.
Yeah, it's going to be odd. We went from a guy that doesn't believe in motion to an offense that runs all types of motion, to your point. But for everyone listening, please go to bleedinggreennation.com right now. Subscribe, get their newsletter, their emails, all their articles. Educate yourself on the Eagles. They're the best in the business. Go follow at Brandon Gowton right now. Listen to him all training camp through every game, the live tweets. It's amazing. Brandon, thank you so much for your time. Anything else that you want to plug that's coming up?
I think you said it all. Thanks for having me. Podcast news on our side. We'll see. Things are a little bit in flux, but hope to have some good news soon. So just, stay tuned to, bleedinggreennation.com and Twitter and whatnot.